Hey, what's going on, gang? Nate on the Stone here. Welcome back to my channel. Is the U.S. becoming a police state? That is the question that more and more voices on the right, conservative and libertarian, are actually asking themselves in serious tones. And when prominent voices on the right, like Candace Owens, are suspended from their Twitter accounts for simply encouraging people to protest against Michigan Governor Greta Whitmer's harsher and harsher executive orders, you can definitely make the argument that that is the direction into which we are sliding. Some people have actually moved on and aren't even asking the question anymore. Matt Walsh, writer and podcaster over at the Daily Wire, wrote an entire essay at the beginning of April where he argued that the U.S. isn't in danger of becoming a police state. It isn't sliding into becoming a police state. No. It already has become a police state. And to back up his point, Walsh provided several examples. The parade of teachers and administrators in Kansas City, which was dissipated by the KCPD, even though these teachers and administrators were conducting the parade inside of their own vehicles. There were the people in San Diego who were given citations by the police for simply watching the sunset on the beach. There was the woman in Pennsylvania who was ticketed for going for a drive. Throughout his essay, Walsh took several opportunities to remind his readers that places like New York and Florida were still states in America and not simply provinces in the USSR. Walsh's point, of course, in saying that America is now first cousins with Mussolini's Italy, was that freedom has been extinguished in our country, or at the very least has been put on a very low burn. His essay, when all was said and done, was him putting on a red liberty cap and charging the Bastille. And other voices in conservative media have followed suit and have been putting on their own red liberty caps. From the Blaze TV, Allie Beth Stuckey tweeted out on April 16th that politicians and public officials had a quote-unquote moral obligation to liberty, in this particular case allowing people to go to church or other religious services. Liz Wheeler from One American News tweeted out that it was tyranny when the police told her and her family to leave a public park that was not closed, even though they were all practicing social distancing. Tomi Lahren, over at Fox, said that if the government can take away our rights whenever it wants to, then we really don't have rights anymore, just permissions. Rhetorically asking, "You good with that, America?" Have there been examples of local and state officials overreaching, sometimes grossly, their authority, some of which actually slide into authoritarian territory? Oh, hell yes! Let's take a look at the aforementioned Michigan Governor Whitmer one more time. In a now infamous example, Whitmer's executive order extending Michigan's lockdown through April 30th made it so that Michiganders could still buy lottery tickets, but couldn't buy paint, car seats, and most bizarrely at all, especially during a global pandemic when there have been legitimate concerns raised about the food supply, vegetable seeds. You know, the kind that you plant in your garden to grow so that you can ultimately eat them? Yeah, those seeds. When people naturally complained about this and pointed out the absurdity of the whole thing, with some extra talk added in that maybe the Michigan legislature should put some more guardrails around the governor's power, Whitmer declared that she was not going to give up one iota of her authority or her power. Oh, and for the cherry on top of it all, Whitmer has also called more recent protests in the Capitol building the worst examples of racism that she has ever seen.
Well, some of the outrageousness of what happened at our Capitol this week, depicted some of the worst racism and awful parts of our history in this country.
Over in the Big Apple, Mayor Bill de Blasio was, rightly, dragged over the coals when he zoomed in on Jewish and Christian communities, warning them that if they continue to hold services during the pandemic and during the city's lockdown, the city might actually take steps to shut them down forever. But saying nothing to the city's Muslim communities, several of which were actually still holding services in their mosques. In California, at the same time that mounted police were keeping the beach's people free, several high-profile sexual offenders were released and put back out onto the streets because of their quote-unquote increased risk of contracting the virus. How bad were these lowlifes? Bad enough that the district attorney for Orange County issued a public warning to the citizens of the county, telling them that these scumbags had been released back out into the wild. Because that's what government is all about, protecting the people! By releasing sexual predators back out onto them, who will then, more than likely, commit more crimes against said people. And, wouldn't you know, that's exactly what happened. This absolutely reveals a bad habit that far too many U.S. officials have. But who elected these yahoos into office? There's the rub, and that leads us to the $64 question that no one has really wanted to ask. See, Walsh and others have been so busy decrying the newly created U.S. police state that they haven't asked, how did America become a police state? After all, there was no revolt, there was no coup, no one has directly usurped authority, at least in the sense of outright stealing an election or staying well past their term limit. The answer is a really uncomfortable one. If Walsh wants to maintain his theory that the U.S. is now a police state, then the only answer to my question, how and why did the U.S. get into that position, the only answer to that is because we, the people, let it happen. When you declare yourself to be a self-governing republic where the people ultimately are the rulers, then the buck stops here with us. Not at Congress, not at the president's desk, not at the Supreme Court, not at any one of the state equivalents. It stops right here.
If you're looking for the guilty, you need only look into a mirror.
What happened is that we Americans stopped governing ourselves. You're probably thinking right now, Nate, what are you smoking, man? We still have elections where we vote for our leaders. Okay, sure, our voter turnout is not nearly as high as in other Western countries, but damn it, we still go out every other November and vote. Yes, true, but you see, that's only part of the equation. That's the easy part. That's the part that anybody can do. There's another component to this self-governing thing, which is a whole hell of a lot harder to do, which is also why it's the most important part. The 18th century British statesman and political philosopher Edmund Burke captured and described this other component of self-government beautifully in his book, Reflections on the Revolution in France, in which he critiqued the philosophical ideas and the foundation of the French Revolution. And in that book, Burke said, quote, "Men are qualified for civil liberty in exact proportion to their disposition to put moral chains on their own appetites. Society cannot exist unless a controlling power upon will and appetites be placed somewhere, and the less of it there is within, the more there is without. It is ordained in the eternal constitution of things that men of intemperate minds cannot be free. Their passions forge their fetters." To put that all into modern parlance, if you cannot control your emotions, your desires, your appetites, then you are a slave, not only to those things, but also to other people. Since if you cannot control your desires, emotions, and appetites, then people outside of you will control them for you. Why? Because, as we've talked about before here on the channel, the number one thing that a society needs is order. Not just for flourishing, but for basic survival. And if that order doesn't come from within us, from all of us pitching in and doing everything in our power to advance and promote and defend the common good, then that order is going to have to come from outside of us. It's going to have to come from other people ruling us. And that translates into people stronger than us dictating what we can and can't do. Now, here's where we get into the whole reason why this aspect of self-governing is so difficult. It means ultimately denying ourselves. It means doing things that we don't particularly want to do, like taking our lunch break to go and vote on election day, doing jury duty, or telling the truth. It also means denying what we want to do, such as running down the street naked with green jello smeared all over our body, or taking heroin. This actually goes hand in hand with the demands of civilization itself. The late great philosopher Roger Scruton argued that civilization, when you get right down to it, largely is a matter of people denying what they actually want to do for the greater good. Again, because civilizations need order, and if no one in a civilization, no one in a society actually denied himself, then we wouldn't have order at all. We would only have chaos. To illustrate, imagine a road system, 5 lanes of traffic each way, like the Hollywood freeway. And imagine that this freeway has no rules. No speed limit, no right-of-way, no flow of traffic, nothing. Complete free-for-all. Do whatever you want, drive however you want. You the boss. How long do you think a system like that would last before it collapsed into anarchy? No wrong answers here, but let me know what you guys think in the comment box below. Oh, and if you're enjoying the video, if you like your neurons being sparked, then take a sec to subscribe to the channel and to ring that bell for notifications so that you will always know when I post new videos about the culture, politics, and religion from a unique POV. But that infringes on my... Yeah, but you see, the thing is, though, it doesn't infringe on the idea of freedom that colonial Americans and the Founding Fathers had. They understood that perfect liberty is the latitude of voluntary conduct informed by reason and limited by duty. Or, as Abraham Lincoln put it, freedom is the ability to do what we ought, not what we want. This actually is the idea of freedom that the West held, starting with the pre-Socratic philosopher Heraclitus. You probably know him best as the philosopher who said, "You can never step into the same river twice." But he is also the first philosopher to actually articulate that there was a universal basic code of behavior and ethics that applied to all people, and which all people had to follow in order to be genuinely happy. Because we are rational creatures, Heraclitus taught that each individual person has a spark of the logos inside of him, the logos being the creative and ordering principle of the entire universe. By acting in accordance with reason, by controlling our passions, our desires, and our impulses, Heraclitus taught that we would actually align ourselves with that creative and ordering principle, with the cosmos, and thereby flourish. Plato, Aristotle, Cicero, the Stoics, the Ecclesiastics, they all held to this deeper and richer understanding of freedom. This idea which was then passed down to the Founding Fathers and to colonial Americans in general. This richer understanding of freedom stayed in America until about the end of the 19th century, when a more atomistic understanding of the word started gaining the high ground. It's this understanding of freedom that took over the culture with the counterculture of the 60s and the sex revolt of the 70s. It is also the idea of freedom that was enshrined into federal law, with Justice Anthony Kennedy's notorious mystery passage, which was part of his majority decision for the Supreme Court case Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which stated that at the very heart of liberty was the right of the individual to define for himself the meaning of human life, existence, and the universe itself. This is the definition of freedom that Americans have wholeheartedly embraced. It is also the definition which has allowed abortion to be protected by law, marriage to be redefined, and the sexual binary to be exploded with complete madness. But those are just the extreme examples. The fact that they might not even seem all that extreme anymore just proves how well they have wormed their way into the mainstream. But more importantly, at least in the context of what we've been talking about throughout this video, this is also the understanding and definition of freedom that has made Americans incapable of controlling themselves. And examples of this lack of self-control are everywhere you look. Did you know, for example, that 2/3 of Americans are obese? Data gathered from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey found that 1 in 3 Americans are overweight, and 1 in 3 Americans are considered obese. 1 in 13 Americans are considered extremely obese. And get this, 1 in 6 kids between the ages of 2 and 19 are considered obese. This calculates out to 73.7% of men and 66.9% of women being either overweight or being obese. Which ain't surprising when you consider the high amounts of fast food and processed food that we eat, on top of our sedentary lifestyles. Sorry, but 17 minutes of physical activity a day, the national average that an American actually gets, that ain't gonna cut it. Or look at the debt. Not the $22 trillion national debt. No. I'm talking about the consumer debt, the personal debt that is owed by you and me. This consumer debt stands right now at $13.86 trillion, with a capital T again, gang, trillion dollars. Now it is true that part of that debt is house mortgages, student loan debt, etc., but it also includes credit card debt. Over 189 million Americans, almost 2/3 of the entire population, have credit cards, an average of 4 each, with an average debt of $8,398. This means that at the end of 2019, the credit card debt for the country surpassed the $1 trillion mark. And just to be clear, that's money that we don't have. You don't have credit card money. That's money that you just borrow from the credit card company. No matter where you look today, there is more and more evidence that we do not want to control ourselves. We don't want to govern ourselves. And why should we, honestly? We have been taught through example in the culture that personal self-gratification is the highest good. Self-control and discipline? That's for chumps. But only if you don't want to be genuinely free. Right now, we're a lot like Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, where everyone is free to engage in as much sex and entertainment as one wants, just at the small price of our independence and our autonomy. We can rant and rage at mayors and governors, and we can hold all the protests that we want. But until we can regain that self-control over our own lives again, all of that ain't going to be worth a tinker's damn. Which also unfortunately means that America is going to have to remain a police state in order to survive. But as always, what say you? Do you think that discipline is required for genuine freedom? And what are some ways that we can start to regain this discipline and therefore our own personal independence? As always, let me know your thoughts, ideas, and opinions in the comment box below. Well, that about wraps up everything for right now, gang. Before you go, if you could show your support by giving the video a like and sharing it with your friends on social media, I would be very much obliged. As always, thank you for watching, for giving me a little bit of your day, and thank you to everyone who has already subscribed to my channel. Until next time, gang, stay healthy, stay safe, but most importantly, remember to dare to read, think, speak, and write. I'll see you next time. Ciao.